There's a crucial molecule in your body that helps control everything: your circulation, your energy, your stamina, your heart, even your sharpness of mind. It's called nitric oxide. But after age 40, your body makes less and less of it. Less blood flow, less stamina, less of you. But now there's N101, the nitric oxide lozenge developed by Dr. Nathan Bryan, the world's leading nitric oxide researcher backed by Nobel Prize-winning science. N101 is designed to naturally restore your body's nitric oxide levels. Just do what I do and let one dissolve in your mouth twice a day. I especially make sure to take it before workouts. N101 goes to work in minutes, releasing nitric oxide directly into your bloodstream, supporting healthy circulation, boosting oxygen delivery to your muscles and brain, helping you feel the way you're supposed to feel. More energy, better blood flow, sharper focus. Day after day. N101, it's the science of you working better. Visit HoffmanNO.com. That's HoffmanNO.com and use coupon code Hoffman10 for 10% off N101. Welcome to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman. I'm very privileged today to host a guest who's been a frequent contributor here on Intelligent Medicine. But we go way back because unbeknownst to him, as a young pre-med student, I cracked open my biology text in college back in the 1970s, and I read of a brand new finding about human health. And it had to do with a new concept about mammalian cells, which are different than plant cells. Plant cells have rigid cell walls. But according to a new theory, which was actually enunciated by today's guest, Dr. Garth Nicholson, we have cell membranes. We have a fluid mosaic cell membrane where there's a lot of stuff going on, and it has unlocked untold riches in terms of drug development and our understanding of disease and the way that our bodies work. And fast forward to the present, Dr. Garth Nicholson is founder and president, chief scientific officer, and emeritus research professor of molecular pathology at the Institute for Molecular Medicine in Huntington Beach, California. And he also is research advisor for Nutritional Therapeutics, makers of NT Factor. And one of the reasons why I'm really convinced that NT Factor works, in addition to the fact that it seems to help me and it's helped many of my patients, is because of the rigorous research, much of which was undertaken by Dr. Nicholson, about the benefits of something called lipid replacement, which we will explain in short order. So, Garth, it's a pleasure having you back on Intelligent Medicine. Thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
And indeed, that is true because, literally that was a revolutionary concept is, we cracked open our biology texts and we read that instead of like cell membranes or cell walls, there was this fluid membrane where things are floating around and there are pores and passageways and kind of molecules that are embedded in primarily a lipid matrix, like a fatty matrix, right?
Exactly. The lipid bilayer matrix in which the proteins are intercalated into that matrix. And that's how they're actually synthesized, by pushing as you make the proteins from amino acids, they're actually pulled into a membrane, which becomes a precursor membrane for the various membranes of the cell.
And so it turns out that there's a lot of influence of that membrane on what comes into the cell, what goes out of the cell, the passages of, ions and, nutrients, but also in terms of receptors. So we sometimes talk about insulin resistance, like there's plenty of insulin out there, but the cell doesn't respond to it. Could that be something wrong with the membrane?
Absolutely. And that's what's been found, actually. The receptors on the surface of the cell are extremely important in terms of insulin signaling. So there are a
And
variety of different signaling molecules which go around between our cells. It's how our cells communicate within our tissues and how our tissues can communicate with other tissues. So by passing messenger molecules, but they all have to bind to receptors at the cell membrane surface or picked up by the membranes themselves and pulled into the cell. But either way, we have this complex message system that's set up.
so
And
uh, cells are a little bit like Chinese boxes, though, because there are what are called organelles, little tiny organs within cells. And of utmost importance are the mitochondria, and they too have membranes. And I think a key to understanding the role of NT factor is not only does it help the external cell membrane, the bilayer, it enriches it, but it also may have an impact on the mitochondrial membranes, which are really where the rubber meets the road in terms of energy production within the cell, right?
more than 90% of your cellular energy comes from mitochondria, the little organelles inside our cells, kind of like the little batteries inside our cells that generate the energy necessary by taking lipids and carbohydrates and converting them to energy and then making high energy molecules like ATP, which is really necessary for all kinds of cellular functions.
So, what is NT factor actually? I
Well,
understand it's like a phospholipid compound. Can you explain that? Break it down for
yeah,
our
these are
lay
these
audience?
are membrane phospholipids, which form the core matrix of all membranes of your cell and your body, and they form the barrier of our membrane surfaces. And these barriers are very important. So you have a barrier to keep out things from outside. You have barriers in your system to separate different cells and organs and so on, tissues. So you have barriers inside your cell to separate various functions that each cell needs to be viable. And one of those barriers is the mitochondrial outer membrane barrier. And then there's a system of invagulated membranes inside the mitochondria
I think they're called
where the
cristae,
energy is
if my
produced,
memory serves me correctly.
where the energy is produced,
Hmm.
more than 90% of it. And there's some enzymatic energy produced, but the bulk of it's there. But the mitochondria do more than just produce energy. They've been called the motherboard of your cell because
Hmm.
they're responsible for coordinating, for example, calcium concentrations and calcium signaling within cells. They make certain lipid derived signals that are used inside the cell and outside as well. They regulate many of the genes in our nucleus are
Hmm.
regulated by what goes on in the mitochondria. And mitochondria pass messages to other mitochondria and to other organelles. So it's a very complex system that's highly integrated. But the mitochondria play a very important role in coordinating the activities in a cell.
So, naturally, with the process of aging, our mitochondria decline in efficiency. So, what are the potential symptoms or diseases that are associated with that?
Well, as we age, we generally lose mitochondrial function. So if you take somebody 30 years old, you can measure their mitochondrial function. If you take that same person at 90 years old, you find that that is only 50% of the function or activity of the mitochondria in producing high energy molecules. So you've lost 50% of your energy production when you're 90. And we've taken 90-year-olds and fed them the NT factor lipids to help rejuvenate their mitochondrial membranes. And we've increased significantly their energy outputs. And we can see that with those older people because they have less fatigue, they have better cognition, better moods, better activities. So a lot of different reasons for taking that 90 plus year old individual and giving them the NT factor lipids. So what goes wrong with that is our basically what goes wrong with our membranes. Well, they get damaged by free radicals, and these free radicals accumulate. They're present all over the place anyway, and they're also byproducts of our normal cellular metabolism. So these free radicals damage membranes because lipids in the membranes are very sensitive to free radical damage. And without going into the details, there are chemical bonds in the lipids in the membranes that are very sensitive to free radical oxidation. And so this happens naturally, but we replace those lipids and we replace them naturally to repair any damage that occurs. And so we have nice, healthy mitochondria, and unless we have no lipid replacement, then there's a problem. So this is why nutrition is important. And beyond nutrition, there are certain lipids that we can't get easily from our diets. And so we have to replace them through supplements. And the one supplement that we use is the anti-factor lipids to provide some of those minor lipid components to cells.
So one of the fundamental questions I have is, there are a lot of things that, we know are helpful for the cells. But the question is, when you consume them as a supplement, do they get to the cells? Do we have evidence that anti-factor lipids are not digested and broken down before they can find their way to the right place within the cells? I think that's an important
we do have that information, and we've been able to put up, for example, a fluorescent reporter group on the lipids.
Mm-hmm.
That if the lipids are damaged, they no longer send out a fluorescent signal.
Mm-hmm.
And we've used this, we've given this to cells, and we used as a model sperm, because we knew that sperm decay, if you just take fresh sperm, they're highly motile, but with time their motility declines. Well, if you put the anti-factor lipids in, you can restore some of that motility. You can prevent, for example, a 25% decline in motility that happens fairly quickly with sperm in vitro, and restore it. And we're doing some studies on fertility and so on. So we know that this is very helpful for men to help restore their fertility and increase their sperm motility. So with a fluorescent reporter, we know exactly where the lipids go. In the case of the sperm, they're absorbed by the sperm head, and they end up inside the head of the sperm, but that's not where the mitochondria are in the sperm. This is why this model is so great, because the sperm has a head, and then it has a mid-stalk, and then a tail. And it turns out in the mid-stalk, between the tail and the head, that's where all the mitochondria are stacked up there. So we can follow the fluorescence from the head, and it goes to the mid-stalk, and then you see it lighting up the mitochondria in the mid-stalk, and that's when you have the increase in motility of the mitochondria. So it all fits together quite nicely.
So we see a direct result from application or consumption of NT-factor to improved mitochondrial health, better membrane fluidity, all the things that keep you functioning normally.
Yeah, and again, we have to replace these lipid molecules. We normally do that from our diet. And some of them we can modify, and others we have to take in through our diets in pristine form. And we know the sources of some of these. You can get them, for example, from seafoods and so on. They're rich in omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids and their lipids and so on. But these fatty acids turn out to be a real critical part of the lipid molecule, because they determine the fluidity of the lipid when it arrives at the membrane. So if they're damaged by oxidative events, then they're no longer functional in the membrane, and they cause changes in fluidity, and islands of lipids form in the membrane. And so there's a lot going on in the membrane, and you need to have a fluid membrane for a lot of the activities. And that's particularly true of oxidative phosphorylation, which is what produces the high energy molecules
within the mitochondria.
There's also another phenomena that's important, and that's leakage across the membrane, because to produce a high energy molecule, you have to have a transmembrane electrical potential.
Like a voltage, yeah.
Like a voltage across that membrane. Turns out for mitochondrial intermembrane, it's minus 150 millivolts. And if this falls because of leakage across the membrane or failure to maintain that transmembrane potential, then what happens is you can't produce the high energy molecules, because that's what drives it. So we have to maintain that transmembrane potential, and this is what we can follow as you get older. You have a tendency to some of your mitochondria start to lose that transmembrane potential, and therefore they're not making efficiently the high energy ATP and other molecules that you need
Well,
to perform all the cellular functions.
what health problems might that render you more susceptible to if you're experiencing mitochondrial inefficiency or decline?
Well, this is associated with practically all diseases, chronic and acute diseases. They're damage to our mitochondria. So we have to repair this. So this is actually one of the number one reasons to take the anti-factor lipids if you've had a damage or a wound or something. We gave veterans, for example, who had gunshot wounds that failed to heal, and we gave them high doses of the anti-factor lipids, and we started to get healing in those wounds. And so we've used it for a variety of different uses. Now, I work a lot with veterans, so they have a number of different problems, and we've also used the anti-factor lipids to remove chemicals from veterans who are chemically exposed. For example, in the Gulf War, many of the veterans were exposed to very toxic chemicals that accumulate deep in our body and our
Burn
cells.
pits and so on, and yeah, yeah.
Very hard to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been able to slowly deplete those chemicals using the anti-factor lipids. So this is another important use of them, besides helping boost your mitochondria. And of course, mitochondrial energy is required for detoxification as well. So there are a number of different reasons why the anti-factor lipids are so important in preserving your health, but also when you're sick, to making you better and improving the healing process and making everything work better.
I understand that another use case, and perhaps an unanticipated use case for anti-factor lipids, is that they enhance in absorption of certain critical nutrients. And this is something that you discovered along the way, right?
Well, we did, because we were using it to slowly remove chemicals. I mean, it's also useful for moving in important metabolites. For example, like CoQ10, which is another essential molecule in mitochondrial respiration in the electron transport chain of mitochondria. So CoQ10 is very hard to transport. You need carriers. So there's actually, commercially, you can buy CoQ10 with the lipid molecules already there in the product to help transport the CoQ10. Well, if you're taking the anti-factor lipids, you don't need that form of CoQ10. You can use the regular CoQ10, which doesn't transport very well, but with the anti-factor lipids, it will, because they're incorporated in the liposomes that the anti-factor lipids form, and they get transported very nicely.
Okay, folks, at this point, let's pause and allow one of our sponsors an opportunity to share an important message with you. So here goes. Listen up.
Has your digestive health been striking out due to poor food choices, medications, stress, and other lifestyle issues? This season, hit a home run for your digestive health with Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics. Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics is a live probiotic encapsulated in small, easy-to-swallow capsules that delivers Dr. Ohhira's signature blend of pre, pro, and postbiotics. Dr. Ohhira's award-winning formula contains a prebiotic blend of fruits and vegetables, which are naturally fermented with 13 strains of live probiotic bacteria for a minimum of 3 years. The result? Dr. Ohhira's game-changing postbiotic metabolites, which are key to supporting long-term digestive, immune, and cognitive function. Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics, an all-star formulation and the best probiotic on the market today for overall digestive health and wellness. Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics, available at Sprouts, Natural Grocers, and other natural health retailers nationwide.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting our sponsors. They, of course, are what make intelligent medicine a continuing free resource to you. And now back to today's guest, Dr. Garth Nicholson. So a question that I sometimes have is, okay, fine, we know that the phospholipids make up the cell membrane. They're important. We need to replete them. Well, why not just take some ordinary lecithin or, they're supplements of phosphatidylcholine or phosphatidylserine? Are they different than the phospholipids that are in anti-factor?
They are, for two reasons. Number one, the composition is generally not the human composition that we need, or the organ composition, the organelle composition, for example, mitochondria that we need. So the anti-factor lipids are balanced towards mitochondrial lipid compositions. That's the first thing. The second thing is they're protected. So let's go back to how nature protects itself. Let's take plants, for example. Let's take a tree that lives in the high north. So this tree has to withstand freezing for half of the year. And it does that by putting in what are called fructooligosaccharides. So these are molecules that actually protect the lipids. They protect it from freezing. But turns out these same molecules also protect the lipids when the trees warm up from enzymatic damage. So besides temperature, we have enzymatic damage, and we have also oxidative damage, free radical damage that protects for all three. So the anti-factor lipids are what we call protected lipids. So they have the plant fructooligosaccharides in at just the right dosage level to protect them. So they protect them during storage before you actually take the product. They protect it during the transport of the lipids through your system where they're very vulnerable. And they protect it once they end up in your cell membranes and your organelle membranes. So it's very important to have those lipids protected.
So
otherwise, you just have to take massive quantities of the lipids. You can overcome this problem by replacing the lipids with massive amounts of lipids. But that's not very efficient. And
but you'd have to take cupfuls of lipids, and it's only
you have to take a lot.
Yeah. So what's it made of?
Well, the membrane lipids that are present in the phospholipids are what we call glycerol phospholipids. So they have a glycerol backbone, and then they have fatty acids, two fatty acids that are connected to that. And those chains of fatty acids are what embed it into the membrane.
Mm-hmm.
And we get on one side of the membrane, those are embedded in, and then on the other side of the membrane, they're embedded in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what makes a lipid bilayer. And that forms the matrix of membranes. And in that lipid bilayer, then proteins and other things are intercalated into the lipids. So membrane proteins, for example, have to interact with the lipids. And so they generally have to have a very hydrophobic, what we call lipid-seeking surface to interact with the lipid
Right.
molecule.
I seem to remember that they have to be what is called bipolar. They have to have the kind of unique property of being simultaneously water soluble and lipid soluble, sort of at the interface between those two things.
Yeah, which is what lipids have as well.
Right.
And these molecules are called amphipathic molecules, but think of them as a bipolar molecule with
Mm-hmm.
a water-loving side of it and
Right.
a lipid-loving side of it, and water-hating side of it. And so the lipid-loving, water-hating side of it is in the fatty acid chain. And so they form a bilayer because they don't want to have water. So they have lipids arranged, fatty acid to fatty acid across the membrane. And in the glycerol parts of the lipids are on the exteriors interacting with water, the matrix outside the membrane.
But they're derived from soy, right? Is that correct?
Well, we've got them derived from sunflower seeds, soy, and
Okay.
different types of products. So people don't have to be so worried about that. But
Yeah.
we don't have any problems with soy allergies with our products because
You take out the
soy
protein,
allergies
you take out the
are due to
allergens.
the glycoproteins and so on in this
Mhm.
in the soy, not the lipids themselves. The lipids themselves don't have any allergic activities at all.
Mhm.
So it doesn't really matter. But we do have these other products from sunflower seed and so on, so they're not soy derived. But
Right.
most of them are soy derived, but they don't have the soy antigens or allergens.
Right. Yeah, and I think that whole and people's antipathy to soy is a little overblown because it's not as if, a molecule of soy will send you into, thyroid malfunction or cause, major gastrointestinal problems. I take your point that it's not the part that is extracted from the soy is real that you get in anti-factor is the non-allergenic part. I think that we have to clear that up for some of our consumers.
Yeah. And it's very important. We've actually published a paper on this that there are no allergens in the product, and there's no evidence that they cause any allergic reactions.
And I
So
think
taking the
that's an
anti-factor
important
lipid
reassurance, I
is
think.
pretty safe.
Okay. All right. Well, I think at this point is a good point, which to inform our listeners that if you want more information, order, just call 800-982-9158, 800-982-9158, or go to ntfactor.com. That's ntfactor.com. And there's some resources available there. Some of those were prepared by you there, and we're going to talk a little bit about some articles that you've written on the subject of aging, on the subject of support for mitochondria and lipid replacement therapy. And you can find those articles at ntfactor.com. Is that correct?
Yes, there should be about 15 of them, and they're brief articles like a WebMD article, for example, that people look up to find out about various medical topics. So they're just 2-3 pages long.
Yeah,
Very brief.
And thank you, because while you're an eminent molecular biologist, and you could really wow us with very, very arcane scientific terminology, these articles are very user friendly, and so kind of news that consumers can use about how to address aging, and especially providing a rationale for using lipid replacement therapy. So we're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to talk more about some of the things that are associated with aging. We'll talk about one of your articles, What is Normal Aging? We'll also talk about menopause and membrane lipid replacement, and an intriguing article that you just wrote about the relationship between dementia and hearing, all coming up on today's edition of Intelligent Medicine. Our guest, Dr. Garth Nicholson, is Chief Science Officer of the Institute for Molecular Medicine, but he's also a research advisor for nutritional therapeutics, makers of NT Factor, and you can find them at ntfactor.com, or you can call them 800-982-9158. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast.